guys, so today we're going to be talking about committee structure at WAMUNC, specifically mainly for GAs. A lot of you guys have done crisis committees before, but you haven't really done General Assembly. We have had a chance to talk about it during sub meetings, and that's definitely been great. And I just want to create this video to clarify some more points, and also this is specific to WAMUNC, which is the conference we're going to, so hopefully that is helpful as well. So firstly, we're going to be speaking about General Assembly. The General Assembly is like the UN General Assembly, made up of many countries. Every member state gets one vote, and no state can veto anything. So really, there is equality between the nations in that sense. Like, they all have a say. However, yes, some nations might have a louder voice than others, like the US, China, nations that are bigger players, but it is important to do what you can regardless of the size of your country, and small countries can have a big voice, especially when it comes to certain issues. So it's very important to understand your country's relationship to the issues and then try to move forward accordingly and be as loud of a voice for your country and for the good of the world as you can. So that's just one thing that's very important with GA, to not get discouraged. So what is the power of the General Assembly? So contrary to what many people might think, they cannot really pass international laws or force nations to do things. That's not something that the UN General Assembly can do. The UN General Assembly can recommend policies for nations to adopt. They can also request action from the Security Council. So they can strongly recommend a nation. So like, let's take the Syrian refugee crisis. They can say strongly recommends that nations bordering Syria take in refugees and establish refugee camps at X, Y, and Z locations. You can do that. You can say something along the lines of suggest that nations allocate funds to educate refugee children in the language of the country that they're living in, so that they can perhaps pursue a life there if they don't have a life back home. So like, that's something you can write. You can say urges the Security Council to take immediate action and put sanctions on nations that don't take in refugees. If you wanted to, I don't think obviously it's a more extreme action, but that's something that they can do too. They can request action from the Security Council. So that's why you have to have your operative clauses. So basically I would recommend watching the How to Write a Position Paper video maybe, or you can watch both of them, and then you'll be able to understand all of this lingo as well. So the operative clauses should be things like this resolution, although you don't put this resolution in when you're writing it. You just say strongly recommends that blah, 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 or urges that blah, 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 or suggests blah, 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 and then you go on from there. Instead of saying allocate fund or allots funds, you should say urges nations to allot funds or something like that, because you can't actually take action really. You can only suggest action, strongly recommend, urge action, whatever one of those words you want to take, and use them effectively to highlight specific things. Like if something is more pressing, maybe use urges, or strongly recommends, and then maybe you suggest for maybe less pressing things. So that's an important thing to note. So the reason why is because, the UN is an international body, but it's also very important to know that it's made up of all of these individual member states that have their own aims and goals and national interests, and they have their own people to answer to, and for that reason, frankly, somebody from the US might not know what's best for, a nation like Senegal. Somebody in Senegal might not know what's best for the US. So that definitely is a component there, that you kind of want to maintain national sovereignty so people can so that leaders can make the decisions that are best for their country as well, and so the UN isn't imposing maybe will upon them. So for that reason, the UN can only really serve to provide recommendations to nations. And this is a key area of debate, actually, when it comes to international policy. How much power should the UN, organizations like the UN, really have in shaping the policy of individual nations? And if that's a debate you're interested in, I encourage you to look more into it. It's really interesting. So the General Assembly is the most basic of the committees because it is pretty general. Like they were saying, General Assembly committees are good for people who are very loud speakers, who can get their voice heard, and who are good at building coalitions. So you might have heard of coalitions in politics before, forming these large groups of people who are working together to make things happen. So that's really what GA is about. It's not about really quick thinking necessarily, although, it's needed to have quick thinking. It's not like quick thinking and crisis notes and like things happening and being out there for yourself and like all that kind of stuff like crisis is. It's more so about the process of solving issues by speaking about them effectively, orating the problem, by joining with other people who want to solve the problem, writing out some solutions, and then presenting those solutions and trying to get other people to support your resolution and the ideas that you have. So it's a very different kind of aim and style of approach, and I hope that you find it interesting. I know that GA is considered to sometimes be a bit boring, but it can be a really nice place to be for some munners, and also, it's a more real experience, I think, in terms of what being in international relations is like. So if you are somebody who is doing MUN to get a sense of what a career in international affairs might be like, this might be more akin to the reality. Not everything ending in nuclear Armageddon like it always does during crisis committee. Hopefully that's not real life. So first, so yeah, these are some of the main committees of the UN General Assembly. Here we go. So yeah, these main committees, I can't highlight this without highlighting the whole document, so I'm sorry, there we go. So these are the main committees. Then you also have specialized committees. Okay, so DISEC, ECOFIN, SOCHUM, SECPOL, administrative and budgetary and legal are all run like a General Assembly committee in the way that I just talked about. Then you have specialized committees that can vary in terms of procedure and setup. So these are somewhat smaller committees. So I would say for those, read the background guide. They usually are somewhat similar to GA for the most part, but some of them have a bit more of a crisis style to them. Some of them have some other elements. So look at that. And also there is the ability to contact your chair if you are doing one of those committees to find out a little bit more about it. Then there's Security Council, which is an interesting proposition within itself. It's slightly more complicated. It's a bit more competitive. Usually very strong delegates do tend to go for Security Council, so it's very competitive. It has 15 nations. So you have the main nations. You have the US, UK, France, China, Russia, big five that are permanent members. And then you have 10 rotating members. So the 5 permanent members do have the power of a veto. So they may veto a resolution. And they can also abstain. And additionally, keep in mind that with the Security Council stuff, you can face crisis situations. So if you think you're a really strong model UNer, and we can also talk to you about that depending, if you're a very strong model UNer who likes crisis and also thinks they're up for a challenge, then yes, Security Council does have elements of crisis to it as well. So intelligence briefings sent by news organizations, news reports, some embassies, governments, backstabbing, like all that stuff can happen. And the nations on the Security Council pass resolutions and directives, which is important to note. So there's some crazy stuff going on there, so it's a bit more interesting. So yeah, that's kind of a fusion, a little bit of crisis and GA. Definitely a lot smaller, definitely a bit more of a crisis-like atmosphere, but slightly different rules of procedure and a little bit different. But I think, yeah, we may or may not get a position on Security Council. So if we do, it'll probably be like 1. So that'll be mainly to worry about for whoever that is. So then there's cabinets and crisis committees. These are more like crisis committees. You guys know about crisis committees for the most part. The ones where you are, sending notes and you're writing directives that are passed and then actions happen and there's a lot of craziness and backstabbing and cool stuff and all of that. And it's not usually dealing with, like a UN organ or anything like that, but instead it's like, medieval times, like the medieval court, or it can be Star Wars, or it can be, some historical period like post-World War II, post-World War II Japanese military cabinet or Japanese government or something like that. So those are kind of some examples of crisis committees. So cabinets, groups of ministers or officials who handle the fundamental aspects of a country. The leader of the country, so the president, prime minister presiding over the cabinet. So you're an individual in this case. You are Mr. whatever, or Mrs. whatever, Dr. whoever, who is in that cabinet. And you're a sole person. And you receive information about, your role in the cabinet, who you are, bios for the other members, and on your country as a whole. So yeah, the cabinet's discussion is based on news briefs, intelligence reports, interactions with top officials, and then there are several crisis situations. So it is kind of crisis-like, definitely. News briefs and other rapid-fire updates, et cetera, and then there are other crisis committees that have a similar structure where you're on like a board or a cabinet. So you have individual action component through personal crisis notes in crisis committees. I don't know if you have that in cabinets as per WAMUNC standards, so we'll have to check that out, but definitely with crisis committees, you have those personal notes. So this is the last part of this lecture, or this video, so I'm sorry this has been going a bit long, but there's a lot of stuff in here. So you have committee structure debate. So committees follow predetermined structures of debate. So you've got basically things are instituted by motions and points. So you guys might have heard of those before. So you have the speakers list. The speakers list is a component of GA. You raise your placard, which is the piece of paper with your name on it that you have, in order to be added to a speakers list. And so you do this at the beginning, usually of the first committee session. You get a minute, usually, depending on the size of your committee, to introduce your country's stance and goals for the committee. So this is where you can say, I want to debate topic A, or I want to debate topic B because I think it's very pressing and I feel this way about it. Usually good to have a prepared speech for your first speech, and even for your other speeches, because speaking time is very limited in GA. So this chair will make a list of all the people who signed up to speak, or not signed up, who raised their placard to be added to the speakers list. And we'll go down until someone motions to move off the speakers list. Okay? So it'll be like, okay, go on the speaker, like motion to go down the speakers list. I don't know the name of the exact motion, but you have that motion. We'll cover this all more in procedure. And then you'll go down until somebody says after they speak, motion to go off the speakers list, and then do something else. So then you also have moderated caucuses, where you have a total debate time set, and then a speaking time for each individual person who's going to be speaking, and a topic. So let's say human rights in China, your moderated caucus, so that's your overall topic, your moderated caucus topic, potential solutions for expanding religious freedom in China. So then the chair will call on speakers as they raise their placards one after another. Each speaker will get this 30 seconds to 1 minute, and then the overall thing will last for 10 to 15 minutes, and then people will just speak during that time. And usually the person who motioned for the moderated caucus will speak first. And this is what will be used most often in almost all committees, including GA. The speakers list is just a kind of specific thing to GA debate, and it mainly is a component of the first committee session where people use it to introduce themselves. You can go back to the speakers list, I believe, at later points in committee, but this isn't as common. Then you have the unmoderated caucus. This is a form of informal debate. Time is set, 10 to 15 minutes. The chair doesn't moderate. People are allowed to get up from their seats, talk to other people, meet other people, have discussions, just conversation. And this is where you're forming alliances, you're discussing the points of a resolution, you're writing your resolution. Although sometimes you also even write your resolution out of committee because people are crazy, and then outside of committee, you'll be working on resolutions and stuff. I think that WAMUNC is very much that kind of conference, so do be prepared for that. It gets kind of intense. You negotiate with other people, you lobby with others. They're like, hey, my resolution is really cool. We have this particular point. Vote for my resolution. Obviously perhaps a bit more refined than that, but you lobby, and then and in order to have an unmoderated caucus in the first place, a majority of the committee has to vote for an unmoderated caucus. So unmods, I cannot stress this enough, are really important well, actually all of these types of speaking are really important, but I'll highlight the importance of each one. Speakers list is really important for the introduction and being able to introduce yourself, to say, I am this country, I have this strong opinion on this issue, and this is how my country has kind of worked to address it, and I think that this approach would be very beneficial on a larger scale level, or whatever you want to say. So say something rooted in your country and relating to the problem at hand. You have moderated caucuses. You want to kind of try to speak during these as often as possible when you have something useful to say. It can be difficult in very large committees to get yourself heard. So, have an idea of what you're going to say, and always be writing down, this is what I think I'm going to say, this is what I think I'm going to say, and then just be ready to go up and say something really effective and powerful, because it's really in these in these short times that they get to hear you speak that I think your chairs really judge you a lot. And then unmoderated caucuses are so important, because this is where you are actually writing your resolution, where you're forming alliances, and where all this stuff is happening. So that's very critical. So we're going to go into a bit more depth of committee procedure and structure in a later video, and I'm going to talk to you about a little bit more about the timeline of GA committees and what to expect from them. So I hope this was helpful. Once again, in order to get these documents that I'm going through here, they are on the WAMUNC website, and they are under the How to Prepare tab. So I will also put links, like I said before. So I hope that this helps you in your preparation, and good luck.